Unconventional, a Marvel fanfiction written on AO3 by TooMuchCaffenine. A quiet song in the background, a man bustling around the kitchen, the smell of newspaper and coffee, the feeling of the sun on the skin, the taser of heat coming down later that day. Tony drew a deep breath into his lungs and took all of that in, trying to calm down his racing heart. He took a sip of coffee and turned the page of the newspaper, pretending he was very interested in some actor's death. God, that would have been me a couple years ago, he thought darkly. The feeling of displacement hit him once again. A couple years ago, he would have been sleeping off a hangover. Now he's sitting at 7 a.m. in some dingy diner, waiting for Natasha's signal to start the action. Your pancakes? The owner of the place stood next to the table, looking pointedly at him. Tony realized he was staring dumbly out the window. Oh, thanks. Sorry. No worries. Hey, you look familiar to Tony Stark? Tony chuckles. Yeah, I get that a lot. Unfortunately, I'm not a billionaire. I was hoping for an enormous tip. Anyway, enjoy your meal. Tony thanked him, the absurdity of the situation making him feel even weirder. As he cut into the pancake, the doorbell rang as a lady entered. The owner greeted her with a kiss on the cheek and a hug. She sat at the bar and began talking and smiling, but it was all static to Tony's ears. A couple of years ago, he would have been disgusted at the idea of sitting in some cheap food place, anonymous, more or less blending into the background. It was pleasant. He wondered if he could really live that life, living in a small house in a small town with Pepper as his wife. How it would feel to have a regular lifestyle. A job, 9 to 5, kids, neighbors. Instead, he had a job that was his whole lifestyle. He lived in an enormous facility for superheroes, no neighbors and super tight security. None of that was normal. But Pepper was his wife, and they had a kid. A very happy toddler that had multiple aunts and uncles. And the other kid, that wasn't really his, but still Tony considered him as his own. The kid's aunt, who has become Tony's dear friend. They had barbecue parties and movie nights. It was something all families do. He was entertained from those thoughts for a moment before finishing off his meal. Then, acting on the spot, he unlocked the phone and called the number that he wasn't really supposed to call during a mission. He waited until it went to voicemail, then left a message. Hi, Pete, he started. I was thinking about you. We're gonna finish this soon, and I'm gonna come back in no time. Love you, kiddo. He watched the street to the empty window. Just peace and quiet. Another Tuesday for people at the bar. Another inconspicuous white van rolled into view, but Tony knew what that meant. Showtime. They walked back into the compound after the debriefing and went to their living quarters. Pepper was making dinner in the kitchen while Morgan was helping her. Comfort filled his heart when he spotted the strawberry blonde hair. He approached her and gently put his hand on her back. Blue Eyes looked at him. Hi, honey, I'm home. And they kissed. Sometime later, he sat in the kitchen with Natasha and confessed all of his weird feelings from the morning at the diner. She understood. I'm thinking the same thing sometimes, she said softly. After a pause, she continued carefully. Living a normal life sounds tempting, but it would turn frustrating very quickly. It's not really for you or me, and you know that very well. They sat in silence for a moment. You know, Natasha continued, we really have a lot. Like money? Tony said dryly. Yeah, but I mean friends, family. When you're going to wake up tomorrow, Steve is going to be cooking breakfast, complaining that everyone is late. You're going to drive Morgan to preschool. Later, Happy's going to bring her back with Peter, and you're going to hole up in your workshop. Pepper is going to drag you out. In the future, we'll go on another mission. Then we'll come back, and everything will repeat. She talked faster now and had to take a breath. Just because we're not a standard family, and we don't have a typical routine, doesn't mean we're not a family, and doesn't mean that routine doesn't exist. It's just unconventional. Unconventional, Tony repeated in his mind. Yeah, that fitted. The constant in the world of chaos. He found it. Tony Stark was a lucky man.